Good evening and welcome back to a special edition of I Read This Book. I am beyond privileged and honored to have Mrs. Sonu Bhasin today. Uh, India is a very interesting country. We have a deep entrepreneurial history. But how much do we know about our entrepreneurs? Do we know anything about Birlas, Singhanias, Tatas, Ambanis? No. Until now, until Mrs. Sonu Bhasin, we didn't have a culture of business historiography, entrepreneurial historiography. Sonu Bhasin ma'am is a pioneer in Indian literature who is shedding light on the Indian entrepreneurial origins, so to speak. Because of her, we have beautiful books like The Inheritors and Entrepreneurs Who Built India. That's what really liked as a reader. It's a delight to have someone who's actually making Indian history, Indian entrepreneurial history, accessible to all. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nishant. I mean, it's a lovely introduction. And what touched me most and made me quite chuffed is that you called it Indian literature. I never thought of myself as writing literature. I'm just writing stories. So you've kind of elevated me to another plane completely, and thank you for that.
No, ma'am. Thank you so much. As a kid who was always interested in entrepreneurial heroes, I always had to look up to people in the West.
Yeah.
Like Bill Gates, Paul Allen, those were my heroes. Walmart, Sam Walton, Ford, and everybody. I never could read about anybody from India.
Yeah.
Because we don't know anything about
Yeah.
Indian entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and for one, I thought the reason was that they never wanted to share their story. And you have somehow been able to get them to talk. That's my first question. How do you do that? These people have always been very, very clandestine, very secretive, very closed, or not. I don't know.
I'm afraid I just don't agree with you. It's not that they've never wanted to talk, it's just that nobody asked them to talk. And, you're right when you say that most of us, and I've done my MBA more than 30 years ago, we never had any case studies. We never studied about any Indian entrepreneurs. All our studies, all our examples, everything that we read about was Philip Kotler and other authors, and the examples that we were given were always of the West. So while some of those people were familiar names, some of the brands were familiar, but it did not connect with us. But we didn't have a choice. When I did start working with family businesses, I realized that there was a reason why there were no case studies, there were no books about Indian entrepreneurs. I mean, if you look at heroes, you look at stars, you of course have the film stars, the Bollywood in India, or Hindi film industry, or any other language film industry. You have sports people, you have politicians, you have educators, lawyers also, but somehow businessmen, and I'm talking of entrepreneurs in the layperson terms because we kind of just call them businessmen, right? Businessmen were never respected, if I can use that word. We didn't look up to them with the same kind of respect that we looked up to, say, to a good lawyer or a good doctor.
Or a good bureaucrat.
Or a good bureaucrat, if there are any.
Yeah.
But but there is a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a reason for it because ever since independence, because of the socialistic mindset of the government, a businessman was always portrayed by everyone, our films, our leaders, society, as someone who was earning money the wrong way. And then when you had taxes that went up to 97%, some businessmen were also forced to do a parallel economy, black money as it's called. You had the license Raj. All of this kind of worked towards giving a successful businessman the image of a person who's successful because he is doing something wrong. He या तो स्मगलर होगा, या पैसे की चोरी करता होगा, या लोगों को एक्सप्लॉइट करता होगा. People just did not believe that a good businessman was able to earn money the right way. There were notable exceptions, of course. What happened at the time of liberalization of economy is that this started changing a bit. Money no longer, profit no longer was a bad word. Uh, 91 to now, things have actually changed. People now see businessmen for who they are. There are outliers in every business, every field. So there may be 10% businessmen, 20% businessmen who are corrupt, who make money the wrong way. But by and large, 60 to 80% of businessmen work extremely hard, harder than you, harder than me, harder than all of us put together to earn the money. And they do not want to break the law. So, when I started writing or working with these people, I realized that these are stories that need to be told. And luckily, my two publishers, Penguin and HarperCollins, also believed in it. And therefore, we have these stories. And you said that, they were clandestine, they were secretive. Not at all.
Apparently.
Not at all. They were more than willing to talk. And what really surprised me was that not only were they willing to talk about their successes, which everybody knows about, they were more than willing to talk about their failures. And all of them have had failures. And here I was in the mistaken belief कि भाई उनको अगर पूछना पड़ेगा, बहुत डरते डरते पूछो कि भाई, what happened, were there any failures? And they talked about their failures so proudly because they've all learned from their failures. So I agree that these stories are important, not only for legacy building for the businesses, but also for the younger generation, because each story is an inspirational story.
And beyond inspiration, I mean, what I drew, so I have been an entrepreneur. I want to build myself as an entrepreneur. What I've realized is that India has a very different way of dealing with people. We have a very unique way of working out, things. And what we learn from the Westerners, it's beautiful. Like Shoe Dog is a great book. And there are many, many books I like of people from the West, but it doesn't apply to India. It's a very, very different terrain. And when I read about an Indian story, so I recently read Kimat Rai Gupta sir's biography by Anil Rai Gupta sir.
Anil Rai Gupta, yeah.
Beautiful book. And the way it talked about the journey was very Indian. And it was inspiring, yes, but also it was extremely essential as a piece of information. That no, man, things don't work like they work in US. India works very, very differently.
Yeah.
And that's something that you did. And if you said 1991, so you have a very huge history of being in a corporate and a woman leader before it was cool. So you
Yeah.
you were a banker, you've been a president of many, many banks and Axis Bank and Yes Bank Group president. Beautiful history. What made you shift to this thing? I mean,
To becoming a writer?
yeah, to bringing out these stories, and yeah, exactly. What got you shift like that?
Okay, so I actually have been writing ever since I was in class 6.
Okay.
And my first published work was in a magazine called Champak. I don't think the young viewers would know about it because I don't know whether it still exists. So Champak was the most popular children's magazine, and I wrote a story. I think I was in class 6. And I got a princely sum of 20 rupees for it, which was a huge amount of money at that time.
Absolutely.
And then off and on.
Which year was it?
So it must have been in 70s sometime. So it must have been I don't know, maybe 75, 76.
Okay.
So 20 rupees went a long way.
Absolutely.
In 75, 76. It was a huge sum of money. And then off and on, I did keep writing. In Children's World was another children's magazine, Champak. Then when I was in the 90s, I used to write for a paper called The Pioneer. So I used to do the lead stories in their supplements. I was still working. I was deputy general manager of Tata Press at that time. But writing is something that I always enjoyed. Then the nitty-gritty of the work and, the responsibilities of work and family took over, and writing was restricted to writing proposal notes for approval to get new projects done, writing to the regulators, etc. And then when I had decided to quit working full time, I had started working in the area of family businesses, it was just happen chance that I met the commissioning editor of Penguin at a social evening. I didn't know he was the commissioning editor of Penguin. And as happens in social evenings, what do you do? And I started talking about the work that I do in the area of family businesses. He found it fascinating. We talked more. And he asked me, have you thought of writing a book about family businesses? I said, no. And he said, would you like to write a book? Now, a Penguin editor, by that time he had told me that he was a commissioning editor at Penguin. And so if a commissioning editor at Penguin asks you, would you like to write a book? It's like Yash Chopra asking a newbie, would you like to act in my movies? Now, who's going to say no?
So you should definitely consider.
So I said, yes, of course. But I was clear even at that time that I didn't want to write an academic book. I didn't want to write a book which was boring, which had numbers, because I'm a storyteller at heart. So
and you're also a banker, by the way.
I am also a business person, so I understand businesses. I understand human stories. So it took us about 4-5 months to figure out the format of the book, the proposed book. I was clear that it was going to be a storybook, stories about real people.
This was on
The Inheritors. This was the
Inheritors is, by the way, my favorite book. When I read Inheritors, I just had to talk to ma'am. I reached out to her on Twitter, and I was just crazy about that book. It's a beautiful book. Absolutely, I've gifted it to 3 of my friends, and I keep gifting it to people.
Oh, please gift to more.
Yeah, that's my agenda. Anybody who reads. And so, ma'am, when you started writing the Inheritors, you have these fascinating stories, and one which comes to my mind is Berger Paints, Dhingra's. Unbelievable story.
Yeah.
It's a thriller. Yeah. It's a page. It's just extraordinary. I couldn't believe that he actually shared this story with people.
Yeah.
I mean, how I know for a fact that people have these stories, the successful entrepreneurs, but nobody talks about how did you get to, what was the...
Yeah, so the Dhingras have a very fascinating story, and Inheritors, they are one of the 9 stories. But again, I think Penguin also found the story so fascinating that they asked me if I would go back and check with Kuldip Dhingra because they wanted to do a whole biography. And luckily, Kuldip agreed. And
that book is also out, which I'm going to read.
It's called Unstoppable, which describes the man, completely.
Absolutely.
So, actually, Nishant, it's easy to get people to talk. You just have to see if...
That's easier said than done, ma'am, because people are so...
I'm talking to you.
You are very kind. You are like 1 in a million. I'm sure no people are not this congenial.
Not at all. So anyway, to come back to...
How did this happen?
So see, I find that people are quick to figure out if the person at the other side is real, artificial, has a personal agenda, they figure that out very well. I mean, each of us, when we meet people, yes, we do make mistakes, but by and large, we are able to figure out कि कोई हमारा उल्लू बना रहा है, कोई हमसे बात कर रहा है because उसको हमसे कुछ चाहिए, हमसे कुछ मतलब है. We figure that out very well. But once people figure out, and I'm talking of myself now, that I don't have a personal agenda. I don't want anything from them in terms of money, in terms of material, in terms of anything. I just want their stories. That's all. And once they figure that out, they almost, it's like a dam that's been opened and their stories come out. Because I'd like to believe that they start trusting me. And therefore, the responsibility on me becomes even greater that I keep that trust. So when
And despite keeping that trust, ma'am, I want to give it to you. You don't make it boring.
yeah,
People, they earn the trust of people. I can imagine there are many shadow writers, many biographers who cannot spill the beans, the uncomfortable beans, right? Which are very hard. But you have sort of given that away.
Thank you.
Beautifully.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. See, again, I am not an investigative journalist.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not writing books to create controversies. My books are actually, I mean, it may sound like a, chota muh badi baat, but for the next 50 years, 60 years, when I'm no longer, here, I'm dead and gone. But the students, young professionals will have Indian stories about Indian business people. Because I think the people, at least that I have written about, and there are many more that I haven't written about, each one is inspirational. And the younger generation have so much to learn from them.
Absolutely. Ma'am, I want to talk about another story, just touching upon it. It's my heartfelt respect, which I want to pay to another woman leader, ma'am from Luxor, Mrs. Jain.
Pooja Jain.
Yes.
Extraordinary.
Extraordinary story.
Absolutely.
And
she's a young girl, and she talks a lot, which is really good.
Good for us.
Good for us.
Good for us.
And she spent her childhood years when her friends were, on holidays. They must have been going wherever, but every day after school and college, she would go and sit in that hot, dusty warehouse of Luxor Paints, spend time with her father and grandfather because she wanted to learn about the business. And she is passionate about her business. And the emotional connect that she has with the business comes from the fact that she spent her childhood every day, not in an air-conditioned office.
Yeah. And I remember reading that line when she said, I used to go to trade fair with my father at fairs, and I used to look at, and when I used to go to college, she used to study at LSR. I used to see other kids using the Luxor pen, and that used to give me, that's every entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
And that's so beautiful that you brought that story.
Yeah.
And now you've come up with people who built India, entrepreneurs
who built India.
Yeah. This is a beautiful initiative. And I've personally read Gujarmal Modi's book. This is my copy. And it's a beautiful book. It's a very important story, I guess. Yeah. It's very important. So this is a series, ma'am, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for this, by the way. On behalf of every entrepreneur, I want to thank you for this work. This is not a small piece of work. This is absolutely very important. What's the vision with this?
So this is with my editor at HarperCollins, and Sachin, who's the editor, and I were generally just talking and trying to figure out what should be a project that we should work upon. And then Sachin started talking about people, entrepreneurs who are forgotten, and people who actually laid the foundation for the India of today. And that somehow just flipped the switch, and it's like a light bulb that went on. And I started talking, and both of us, I remember this was during the pandemic time, we were on the phone and we talked to each other very excitedly. So the plan that came out was that it'll be a series of books, and it's called Entrepreneurs Who Built India. And the protagonists are going to be entrepreneurs who existed before independence, before liberalization, because those were the toughest years to work in. Before independence, because of whatever the way was, it wasn't a developed country, roads were not there, education wasn't as much, and pre-liberalization because of the opaque license Raj, right? But we had successful entrepreneurs even back then, and it's because of the factories they built, the businesses that they built, that India, when it got liberalized, the economy got liberalized.
We had something to stand upon.
Others were able to take advantage of that. But in family businesses, very few family businesses last beyond one generation in the manner that they were. And sadly, a lot of the business people and the business houses that existed at that time no longer exist in that manner. And the founders are almost forgotten. And you talk about Gujarmal Modi, which is the first in the series. The second one is Lala Shri Ram, which got released some time ago. Now, if I'm walking on the road and I just randomly ask a person कि भैया आपको पता है गुजरमल मोदी कौन है? Chances are he'll say गुजरमल मोदी कौन? But to the same person, if I say भैया आपको पता है ललित मोदी कौन है? वो कहेंगे हाँ वो IPL वाले.
या फिर you ask them Godfrey Phillips की वो cigarette देना तो शायद
हाँ. But Lalit Modi is the eldest grandchild of Gujarmal Modi.
Absolutely.
And he's better known. I mean, he's also a pioneer in his own way. IPL, look what he's created. But Gujarmal Modi, who set up India's seventh largest, industrial empire, has a city named after him. An average person doesn't know. So, that was such a revealing insight to me. And now that, the book is out and
it's a conversation starter.
It's also, the number of people who write to me, strangers, that we grew up in Modi Nagar. Our father worked in Modi this thing. People write to me, I used to work in Modi Olivetti. I used to work in Modi Xerox. There's such a sense of pride, even among people who worked in these enterprises. And I think they're tapping into that pride. And it's actually a lovely experience to see how people talk so fondly, so nostalgically, and so proudly about these industrial groups.
Absolutely.
And therefore, it just strengthens my belief that what these guys built was just so strong. It's just unfortunate that there were divisions in the family, and therefore, the next generation got bits and pieces of the business. Most of them are doing well also, but that group was really something.
Absolutely. They are Walmarts of India.
Yeah.
Yes, Waltons of India.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, ma'am, how much time does it take you to come out with, complete this from year to year, a manuscript like this?
From end to end?
Yeah.
Normally would take me about a year.
A year with research?
With research.
And you talk to people?
I talk to people.
The founders and everybody?
I love talking to people.
Absolutely.
I'm talking to you. So you realize I love talking to people. No, so I find that the stories are best, got from people who either worked with the protagonist, who are part of the family, who were friends with or associates or whatever. Because whatever other material there is in the public domain is very boring. It just gives you facts. वो उन्होंने इधर से ये लैंड खरीदा, वो ज़मीन खरीदी, इधर ये फैक्ट्री लगाई, उसमें ये बनाते थे, उसमें इतने उनके कारीगर थे, ये था, वो था. So it's very boring. But
the human angle.
The human angle. Because at the end of the day, each businessman is also a human being. With all the warts and with all, blemishes, good points as well as not so good points. So it's when you put them together that the personality of the protagonist comes out. And people get to see the person as he or she was. And the best compliment that I feel I get is that when people who have read Unstoppable of Kuldip Singh Dhingra, and I'm talking of that because he's still living. Gujarmal Modi and Lala Shri Ram are no longer living, but Kuldip Singh Dhingra is still there. So there are a number of people who've come to me and said, If we were to meet Mr. Dhingra on the road, we will just go up and start talking to him because we feel we know him. We think we feel as if he's our friend.
I had that feeling after just reading that story.
Yeah.
I've not read the entire book, but he seemed so affable.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah. No. So he is affable, but he's also ruthless.
absolutely.
I mean, there's yin and
that
yang.
was the contradiction.
Yeah. No, but people get to see the person and they start believing that they know him. And to me,
That's a compliment.
that is a good I mean, that is the best compliment.
Ma'am, another compliment which I want to come true. It's more of a wish, but this is very cinematic. All of these stories, some of these stories,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, Dhingra sir and Mrs. Jain,
Yeah.
and many others, very cinematic. So, do you, after the book's success, do you get these people approach you from the film and web series game, applause and so on, and talk about like how can we adapt this? Because cinema obviously can do wonders.
So there's interest, definitely. But I think the audiovisual world is a completely different world than the print world. Takes time, has its own challenges, but hopefully
Yes.
something should come through. Again, till it actually happens, I don't want to talk about it.
Of course.
But hopefully there should be something in the works.
Right?
Kind of a series which
Yes.
creates legacies dealing with business.
Absolutely, because Scam 92 was such a success. That was a sign that we are ready for such material.
Yeah.
And I am a huge movie buff, and so are you.
So am I.
And
Yeah.
I would love to watch everything that gets
Yeah.
adapted
Yeah.
on your work.
Yeah. No, because this is a kind of legacy creation. I mean, 100 years from today, when the youth of India in, say, 21, 23 looks back and wants to find out what was, India like, they should have some movies, they should have some podcasts.
Like America does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they should have podcasts, they should have books so that they realize what their, ancient legacy was. Because 100 years ke baad to wo, आज का जो वक्त है वो तो ancient हो जाएगा ना उनके लिए.
Absolutely.
So,
No,
yeah,
and
hopefully.
this is how countries are built.
Yeah.
When we learn to celebrate our people, our heroes, so
Yeah.
to speak. The
Yeah.
guys who gave us jobs
Yeah.
while we were alive,
Yeah.
and so on. So this is very, ma'am. You've interacted with so many family businesses. You've run this family
Business.
business
Families
organization.
and business.
Families
FAB,
in
huh.
business. And what can you tell the entrepreneurs of today based on your interactions with these legacy institutions?
So the reason I set up FAB, which is Families and Business, is because when I looked at the data, it is frightening that 90% of world commerce is in the hands of family-owned businesses, but 70% of them don't even go beyond one generation. Only 30% go into the second generation, and only 3 or 4% make it to the fourth generation or beyond. And that this data is true for India, it is true across the world as well. And the reason why businesses fail to perpetuate, family businesses fail to perpetuate, is because not because of anything that happens in the business, but because of what happens in the family.
That's correct. I read this book by Sunil Kant Munjal sir.
Yeah.
Four brothers.
Making of a hero.
Making of a great book. Again, I was happy to interact with.
Yeah.
So he also said the same thing.
Yeah.
Where it becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
For the family, and that's why they had this whole succession thing, which shaped up. I'm sorry, I cut you short.
No, that's perfectly fine, and I do agree with you. And the thing is that every business has a business strategy. You ask any family business owner, you wake him up in the middle of the night and say, "Aapka business strategy kya hai agle 10 saal ka?" He'll reel it off because that is something that they all work on. But to the same businessman, you ask him, when he's sitting in the office, what is your family strategy? They don't have a family strategy. And for family businesses to perpetuate and be a multi-generational one, they need to have a family strategy just like they have a business strategy. So my work, my objective is just to build awareness, especially among the small and medium enterprises, that you need to build a family strategy just as you're building a business strategy, because a family strategy is one that is going to ensure that you have a multi-generational business.
So that's what you would like to say
Say
to
that to everyone, whether you are first generation, whether you are third generation, whether you are 25 years old or whether you are 65 years old, please make sure that you have a family strategy if you want your business to last 100 years or more.
And how does this, stay relevant when talking about the new age venture capital, where it's mostly management-run businesses where founders exit in the first 20 years itself?
Yeah.
How do you see?
So,
What can they learn from?
no, so the point is that, when I'm talking of a family strategy, I am talking of family owned businesses.
Own businesses.
Now, a lot of the entrepreneurs of today, the startups as they're called,
Yes.
some of them may continue their majority holding, so they may be owned by the family or individuals, or some of them may just sell it off and the companies are then board managed.
Yes.
So, a board managed company does not need a family strategy. It, of course, needs a succession strategy, which is the duty of the board. But for anyone who who owns a business and wants the business to perpetuate, whether he or she runs and manages the business or not, that is not the issue. But if the holding is that of the owner, they need a family strategy.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely wonderful. So, ma'am, with the entrepreneurs who built India, you've talked to so many good entrepreneurs. Is there a wish list that you haven't been able to reach out to as of now? Is there something that you like? If we were to manifest something, it's called modern day manifestation, where you just like talk what you want. What would you like as a writer?
I want to talk to more women entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs who are successful, because we don't have too many women entrepreneurs, and we have a lot of them now. But I say this in a lot of my interviews, that if any of the viewers know of any women entrepreneur who existed before 91, even pre-independence, did some good work, I would love to tell her story. And I hope it's not only one, I hope there are a few. But I would really like to know more about women entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. This is surreal. This is beautiful. Thank you so much, ma'am. I really love talking to you. Again, to all our viewers, I just say, if you're wanting to learn about India, you must learn about Indian businesses, because business and economy shapes a country as much, in fact, more than anything. Businesses and economies shape everything. And these companies, these people, and these empires, these organizations have literally transformed this country brick by brick. And until now, we didn't have the good fortune of knowing about them. But thanks to ma'am, we do have a clue, and we are beginning to get a clue. So get your, copies of Sonu Bhasin ma'am's all books, actually. Inheritors, Gujarmal Modi, Unstoppable, and DSR Group. Shri Ram Group, yeah. DCM Group. I'm yet to read that, by the way. So thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. This is an honor.
This
is a
is
privilege.
really nice. Thank you so much for doing this. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. So glad.